Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at this Phalaenopsis orchid in my collection, and its parentage is at the bottom of the video here, and it's called Sweet Girl. This is probably the second time that I have shown you guys this orchid because this is relatively new to my collection, and when I purchased it, it had already had flowers, and this is actually the first rebloom under my care. Toward the end of 2018, I realized that this orchid was putting out a spike, but it took its sweet time. It wasn't really until mid-February 2019 that it started to have buds emerging, and I think it was around mid-March or so that it started to open its first bloom. So it took it, this orchid took about 2.5, 3 months to really, go from shooting out a spike to come in bloom. But I really enjoyed this orchid's progression, and just by looking at it too, this orchid is somewhat different from a lot of the orchids that I have. This one is not a primary hybrid, but it still has a very pleasant fragrance. The fragrance is not as strong as many other species or primary hybrids in my collection, but what's interesting about the fragrance is that toward the end of it, it has that minty smell to it, which I find pretty interesting because none of my other orchid would have that kind of minty smell, and this one has that minty smell to me, so it's one of the interesting things about this orchid. Another thing is more on the visual appeal. This orchid is very special in that toward the center, it has this white color, but then along the edges of the flower petals and sepals, including its lip, has this very yellow, well, I wouldn't say it's dark yellow, I think it's a light yellow, bright yellow color. And it's pretty stable. It doesn't, sometimes like for my other phals, like my golden pixie, sometimes their pigments, their color can vary. But for this particular orchid, the flowers look just like the flowers that came with, that this orchid came with when I first purchased it. So it's pretty stable. In terms of care, this orchid is not very difficult to grow. It's not finicky. It's actually pretty hardy. I don't remember paying any special attention to it other than giving it a repot after its flower spike from last year died back. And I grow this orchid in semi-hydro, and I think this orchid did not have any adjustment period. Pretty much after I put it into semi-hydro, it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And later in this video, you'll be able to see its root system in the container and how some of the roots are already grown into the reservoir. So this orchid really has very little maintenance issue. Right? For me, I only need to give it water when I see no water in the reservoir and no extra moisture along the edge of the cup, inside the cup. Then that's when I give it water. And I only give this orchid quarter strength fertilizer every single time. And once a month, I do use just water to let it soak for at least half an hour. And the purpose of that is to dissolve any salt buildup from unused fertilizer. right? Because if you just always give it some fertilizer, over time there's always going to be some salt built up, and it's just good to flush those away. So you give the roots a better environment to grow fresh roots. And I noticed that when you do your flush, a week after that, usually orchid pick up the growth really quickly, and especially for root growth. Somehow I think, after the flush, it just is cleaner, less salty, I guess, for the roots to grow. Some subscribers have asked me why I like semi-hydro so much. It's not that I love this method so much, it's just a convenient method. In fact, I don't only use one method. I have many different orchids grown in different methods, like, in moss with no drainage hole, in traditional moss media with holes at the bottom. I have orchids in bark chips. I have orchids in semi-hydro. So it's just that semi-hydro actually a lot of my orchids, they do really well because once they get adjusted to that growing method, and once they have roots into the reservoir, it's really autopilot because, unless they outgrow the container, otherwise, because the media doesn't break down, right? The clay pebbles, the hydrocorn and manto clay, they don't break down. So I only need to make sure I flush so that they are not too salty. Other than that, I really don't have to do anything unless orchids, like I said, outgrow the pot, the container, or if there is any kind of root rot issue, then I would do an emergency repot. Otherwise, it's autopilot for me, I think. Another thing you may notice that you look at the top two leaves, they are growing toward different direction. And what happened was I decided to switch the direction the orchid was facing while it was growing new leaves, because I wanted to somehow influence the way that it was growing into the direction that it was growing into, because I think if I don't change it, if I didn't switch around, this orchid will continue to grow toward one side, and then it will just continue to grow leaning down more and more. So what I did was I turned it around 180 degrees, so from facing the window to away from the window, so 180 degree turn, and that's why the top leaves are growing at two different directions. And that was just some experiment that I did. I knew what would happen, but I still did it because I want to make sure that this orchid is not gonna grow leaning down more and more. And here in the video clip, you see that this orchid has really good root system in the container, and a lot of these roots are new roots after I potted this orchid into this semi-hydro setup. So these roots are pretty well established, and some roots are already in the reservoir, but right now you see it's pretty dry inside the cup because I was during this time it was a dry day for this orchid. In fact, if you look at the bottom of the container, it was just still some moisture because the media is darker in color, and so I think I actually waited for another 3 days before I gave this orchid water at the time. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this orchid. The color is amazing, even though the fragrance is not very super strong, but the fact that it reblooms, I think I did something right for this orchid. And here is just a bonus footage for you to look at. You may recognize the flower or the orchid on the left. That's one of my sweet memory M's. And the one on the right is Phal That one I haven't finished editing the video for it, so hopefully by the time you see this video, I will have already uploaded that one, the video for Marriott too, but otherwise just stay tuned because this one is a first bloom for me. I've had this one since it was a very tiny little seedling, and now it's just having lots of crazy roots, both in the media but also outside the media area roots. and it's blooming for the very first time under my care. And it just so happened that all these orchids were blooming, so I decided to take a video of all 3 of them together. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!